Our presentation on the urinary system. The urinary system in the human body starts about midsection, kidneys, adrenal glands, the blood vessels that connect them. Whenever we have some discomfort with that, we generally feel it about this area, middle of the back. Come down the ureters on either side coming out of each kidney. They come into about 2/3 up the way of the bladder, large muscular bulb type organ. And we have the urethra, which is common to male and female, and from here down we have slightly different structures. Function of the system: primarily to maintain water balance in the body and mineral balances in the body, primarily specific in minerals to sodium, potassium. Also some other mineral control. That's the main function. Keep this body properly hydrated, clean up toxins out of the bloodstream, pass them off in the urine. With proper hydration and alkalinity of the body, this system really shouldn't have any problems. I'm going to go through some of the things that we usually run into here. The adrenals are sitting right on top of the kidneys. Now, they're really part of the glandular system, but they have a tremendous effect on this system. If you have weak adrenals, it is entirely possible to have some kidney urinary tract problems. One thing that the kidneys and related to the adrenals do, the adrenals control all the valves in our body. So if your adrenals are very stressed, you weaken them either with improper nutrition and combine that with physical, emotional stress, you could end up with, number one, an incontinence problem. Because through their control of minerals in the body, these valves here can become weakened. We've had a fair amount of success in our work with incontinence, working on the adrenals, not just working on the bladder. It isn't necessarily just that problem. Then we come on down, and this blood is being cleaned up here. We have the aortas going in and out, and we have come to the ureters coming down on either side. Not usually any problems with them until we get to the bladder. This is a storage organ, and it is capable of expanding almost twice its size, about at least 1/3 larger. And there's a lot of people that go through life thinking, wow, I have wonderful bladder control. I can just hold my water all day. And maybe that's convenient if you're a long-distance trucker or a bus driver, but it's not good for this system. About 2/3 of the way up, just before where the ureters run into the bladder, there's sensing organs in there, and they feel pressure. And as the bladder expands with fluid in it, and it reaches that level, those organs tell you that it's time to evacuate the bladder. So if you keep ignoring that, what happens is the fluid can back up into the ureters, and that's when we start to get into an infective situation, an irritation. They can back all the way up into the kidneys. The system is supposed to be flushed routinely. Bladder is never supposed to be more than about half full. When it reaches up here and the thing is swelling up and you're getting all this pressure, you're starting to do some damage. So it is not a good thing to try and say, oh, well, I can wait just a little while longer. I know when the kids are in the back of the car saying, are we there yet? Can I stop and pull over? Well, that may be a kid thing, but for an adult, you've got enough common sense that you should be aware of the fact that, hey, I have a little pressure. It's time to go do something about it. The urethra on down, very rarely to have any problems there, except if there's not proper personal hygiene being taken care of. There can be infections fed back through the urethra into the bladder. Sometimes you get a bladder infection. If you have a little infection going on and you are one who retains water a lot, tries to control your bladder, then that infection can creep back up the ureters and get to the kidneys, and you have a kidney infection. Another thing that happens in the kidneys is kidney stones. Common causes would be a very high protein diet, animal protein specifically, makes the body acid. Protein is very difficult to deal with throughout the entire human system, causes formation of stones. The body's acid, there's large protein molecules in the urinary and in the water, in the bloodstream going through here. And hard minerals begin to form out of the bloodstream and form in there. It can be calcium-based, could be silica base, there's several different possibilities of stones, but the main key to keep stones out of the system is to keep this body alkaline, and we talk about that a lot in this series, but also to keep the system flushed. This is our water system, and it's not our water retention system, it's our water flushing cleaning system. So we need to keep a lot of water running through this system. If you happen to form some stones, we're going to talk about some things that will take care of that for you. And it can be done rather easily to get stones to break up in here and flush them out. We'll come on down, go back down to the bladder again. In the male, around this urethra, it passes through the prostate. And if you get swelling of the prostate, sometimes benign hypertrophy, something of that nature, it begins to put pressure on this system, and you have this feeling of frequent urination, but you don't have complete elimination or evacuation of the water. The water can back up the system again, and someone with that situation, the hypertrophy of the prostate, tends to have a lot of kidney problems, a lot of urinary tract infections because of having incomplete elimination of the water all the time. So even in that situation, while you're treating the prostate with your nutritional herbal programs, lots and lots of water. I know some people that say, well, I can't drink lots of water, I'm incontinent. Well, part of the problem that someone becomes incontinent is because they become dehydrated over a long period of time, and this tissue gets weak. All the body muscles and tissue gets weak in a dehydrated situation. So one of the corrective processes for incontinence is to get hydrated again. This sounds like a catch-22. The first time someone tries to get there, they say, well, I spent the whole day in the bathroom, and that's very uncomfortable. It's inconvenient, so I'm not going to do that. What we kind of recommend for water is if you take your weight, let's say you weigh 160 pounds, and we'll make that directly into ounces, 160 ounces. If you'll cut that in half, you'll have 80 ounces of water. So just take your weight, make it directly into ounces, cut it in half. That's the water that would be required to hydrate this body. So let's say you're a person that drinks, like our nation, who thinks 1 cup of coffee a day is all the water anybody needs. Okay. And juice and food and all those things don't count. This has to be plain, clear, pure water. Anything that creates a digestive process, it might save your life if you're out in the middle of the desert, but it's not going to fully hydrate the body because much of it will be taken off into digestive processes. Plain water, drink your appropriate amount. All of this tissue gets stronger. The kidneys are given all the fluid they need for flushing. The water is moved through here routinely, doesn't become stagnant, can't form any kind of stones in the kidneys, bacteria that might happen to get in the system won't stay there, it can be flushed out. It's absolutely critical that we do this water hydration system. Kidney stones, hydration will help prevent it, alkalinity will help prevent it. Other problems that might happen on down here, we talked about some infections. If you keep the system flushed, that's generally all anybody needs. And we'll talk about some herbals that are astringent and antiseptic in this area. There's another problem that develops down here in the bladder. And the first one that most people are aware of would be a bladder infection. And the other one might be some incontinence. Let me get my eraser here for a second. When you get down into the bladder, there's a situation that develops, and it's not extremely common, but a lot of ladies run into this. They're not sure why it happens, and it gets misdiagnosed, and it's, let's see, the one that's common is cystitis, C-Y-S-T-I-S, okay. And this bladder can get some lesions in it, it can get some cysts, it can become irritated, but there's another problem. It begins to kind of harden. And that can be done from bruising, from an injury, from an improperly fitting birth control device. And what happens, it also begins to lose its supply of oxygen to the tissue. So blood system that's running here is constantly trying to feed this tissue with oxygen, so you begin to grow more capillaries. And this particular situation is called interstitial cystitis. And when that happens, this tissue gets thicker and firmer. And when you go get a particular scan, they'll look inside, they'll view that with a camera, take some pictures. And a healthy bladder inside should look like the inside of a pink balloon, pale pink. When you have this interstitial problem, you look inside of it, and I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of Mars with all its red lines and canals going across it. That's what the inside of this bladder would look like. It'd have all kinds of lines, and they're blood vessels. And what the body's trying to do is feed more blood to the system here because it doesn't have enough oxygen. So we'll talk about some supplementation that will help with that. So the circulatory system and how much oxygen you have pumping through it is also critical to keeping this system healthy. Greatest thing we can do, remember the water and alkalinity. Keep this system clean, flushed, keep it relaxed, keep it running the body alkaline. This system stays alkaline, very, very minimal chance of forming stones. A high animal protein diet is very detrimental to this system. Keep things running properly. I can't stress the water enough. We talk about that quite a bit. We're going to go over to talk about some of the supplements in the urinary system. We've got water right up here on top. We just talked about that. 1/2 your body weight in ounces. That's your minimal water consumption. Always remember that. I mentioned the acidity of the body. Alfalfa, great, great alkalizer for the body. It's full of trace minerals. It helps the urinary tract tremendously. Very soothing to it. But it would be my first herb of choice to use in a person who is eating too high an animal protein diet, and we're trying to shift them back into the alkaline nutritional mode to kind of move things along rapidly. We would go to alfalfa as an herb. Come on down here to slippery elm. Slippery elm is extremely soothing to the urinary tract. It's healing to the tissue. It keeps things moving. I like to relate that to the word slippery. And while you're using it, it's also nutritive to your body. But in the urinary tract, it will be very soothing to any irritation to put slippery elm into this system. Come down here to kind of a little group. Dandelion, parsley, corn silk. These would be herbals that we would use as a diuretic, something to help move water out of the system. Say there, you feel like you're doing a little water retention. Dandelion, parsley, corn silk. Corn silk is not only a good diuretic, but it's very healing to the kidneys and the urinary tract. Very soothing to the bladder. So this one would be used also in irritation, but fantastic to be used as a diuretic. Now, these are all very high in potassium. Let's say someone goes into the doctor and the doctor says, oh, you have high blood pressure, so I'm going to put you on a low sodium diet, and now I'm going to put you on a diuretic. And what the normal, traditional allopathic approach to getting water out of the body is, they take the sodium diuretic and pull the sodium out of your body. When the body is depleted in sodium, water goes with it. That's true. But it also takes potassium with it. So while they're pulling sodium out, they pull the potassium out of your body. So now they've created an imbalance. So they'll say, oh, well, we need to give you a potassium supplement. And it's very difficult to keep that balance going on. The body's always in a state of stress. The herbal approach, the holistic, would be to take this potassium and increase it. By increasing potassium, the body tries to maintain this balance here. And it will excrete water to do it. So you will never end up with a potassium imbalance. It's a much cleaner system. Now, there are some needs periodically where you have to do a little work on the adrenals, where you have to do a little work on the bladder itself. Maybe perhaps you've got a prostate problem, but generally working with dandelion, parsley, corn silk, you can do a tremendous amount, like in early stages of pregnancy, where a woman will be having a little swelling of the ankle, something of that nature. These herbs are very safe. The only caution on parsley here is in pregnancy. If you are in the later stages of pregnancy and you're using parsley, it can kind of restrict the mother's milk from coming in completely. So I wouldn't use parsley in the later stages, but you could use either corn silk or dandelion anywhere through a pregnancy situation. Otherwise, these are great for anybody. Uva ursi is an astringent type of herb. It's an antiseptic type of herb. It is excellent for working with an infectious, irritated situation in the urinary tract. It is also a major healer for the kidneys. Someone who's had stones or had some episode with kidney irritation or infection, the uva ursi would be restorative to kidney function. It's terrific for that. Cranberry, and many times we combine cranberry with buku. Cranberry's been around for years and years and years, maybe centuries. People have used it for urinary tract infections. Originally, the total thought was, well, the system becomes a little too alkaline, maybe the system is out of balance and the bacteria can start to grow down there. So cranberry is actually an acid fruit that makes you acidic, one of the few that make the entire body acidic. But by raising the acid level slightly in the urinary tract, you prevent bacteria from growing. So it works in that mechanism, that's true. But we've also had some research over the past few years that find that within cranberry, there's, I believe the proper word would be flavones, the thing that make it colored, coat the walls of these ureters. They're going down here to the bladder. They actually coat the walls in here and prevent bacteria from hanging on in the urinary tract. So the cranberry actually kind of gets things nice and slick in there. Not in the sense that you've got a mucus problem or anything, but will keep bacteria from penetrating the walls, keep them moving out as you continue to flush. Double mechanism with cranberry. Buku is an antiseptic, an antibacterial. So this makes a great little combination here. And if you're going to do cranberry, I suggest you do an herbal form of it. Don't just go buy cranberry juice. Be very cautious with that. Most of the time they load the stuff up with sugar, because cranberry is kind of bitter. And by loading it up with sugar, you can just aggravate this infective situation. So we like to use a herbal type cranberry, maybe combine it with buku. Juniper, another good diuretic, another healer, soothing, slightly antiseptic, antibiotic to the urinary tract. Silica as a mineral. Silica has a tremendous effect on the continuity of tissue, the strength and structure of it. So if you have a weak bladder, for example, silica should be in a formula that you're working with. Now we can pick this up in some herbals like horsetail, shavegrass, same herb, horsetail, shavegrass, you'll see it by either name. The cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, for example, have a fairly high degree of silica in it. But if we're going to add an herbal, it would probably be horsetail. Sage is high in silica also. So you might find sage in a urinary tract, toning type of herbal combination. Now we're going to get into some of the vitamin supplement situation. Acidophilus. We do not have acidophilus growing, per se, in the urinary tract. But there's a direct immune system response. If the colon is not properly balanced with friendly bacteria, the urinary tract is very prone to an infection. So when someone has an irritation and an infection in the urinary tract, while you're doing these other things, it is highly recommended that we give them friendly bacteria and raise that count. It definitely improves the system. And we have CoQ10 over here. This is here primarily CoQ10 oxygenates tissue. Remember when we were looking at the chart about interstitial cystitis? That would be something that would be in a program to help relax the bladder, soothe it, and keep that extra blood vessels from growing in there, trying to oxygenate that tissue. CoQ10, of course, it does that throughout the entire body, was originally found in the heart muscle, but it oxygenates all the tissue in the body. It is very, very good for the bladder. Would have to be in rather large doses as a therapeutic situation, but in maintenance, make sure you've got CoQ10 in your daily consumption. It'll help keep your bladder in good condition. B complex, we've got vitamin C, A, E, the ACEs over here. All these are the antioxidants. B complex. You've probably heard, or maybe someone's made the comment that, oh my gosh, you're just taking those vitamins and you're peeing them away. Well, because your urine's bright fluorescent yellow, or it's got a lot of yellow in it. Vitamin C is generally yellow, about the color of this paper here. B complex tends to turn the urine a fluorescent-looking yellow, like maybe what legal pads mostly are. This urinary tract system is designed that some of these vitamins have to dump through it to maintain its health, to maintain the strength and the cleanliness of the system. So if your urine is absolutely crystal clear, no color, you are deficient in vitamin B and C. It should have a yellow cast to it. If you are doing therapeutic doses of these B complex or vitamin C's, it can get very, very bright yellow. And that's not hurting anything. It doesn't mean you're throwing away all of the vitamins that you're taking. That's not true. It's a very small percentage that dump off in that system intentionally by the body. Now, yes, both C, and the B's are water soluble. Under stress and under daily body movement and so forth, we tend to dump off those vitamins that aren't being used all the time. But even if you were doing everything perfectly, you've got to have some color in that urinary tract, or you don't have your vitamins in balance. The antioxidant, the rest of the formula, A and E, selenium, we might use some pycnogenol's here. The free radical damage in this system can lead to breakdown, just as it can everywhere else in the body. So we would want the antioxidants in this system as well. I have a little big old label down here for trace minerals. Starting at the very bottom and starting very young, common cause of bedwetting, weakness of the bladder, is lack of trace minerals in children. There may also be a psychological problem, but the first time a child wets the bed is probably because of a lack of trace minerals. Then, if we implant a psychological problem, that compounds it, and then we start going to counseling, or we start doing all this, and we should be looking at the trace mineral situation. Remember the adrenal weakness. If you've got bedwetting that's going late in years, there may be an emotional problem causing a mineral imbalance through the adrenal system, down to weak trace minerals, down to poor muscle control, poor valve control, and you have bedwetting. Now, same thing goes all the way through up into adults. The trace minerals make the body strong. It takes trace minerals, enzymes, for everything to be repaired through this system. So they're really critical that we have the proper balance of trace minerals in our body. Within this system, we can also use a number of essential oils. Let me get some space here for us. Don't forget the water. 1/2 your body weight. Before I do the essential oils, I'm going to go back to the water for a second since I just touched on that. If someone says, oh, I can't do that because I'm a little incontinent and I'm going to run into problems, or my boss won't let me take a break. Well, your boss isn't going to pay for your bladder work when you're 80 years old. He's not going to do that. So you have to make a decision now to take charge of your health. And if you've got to go, you've got to go. Well, if you're flying an airplane, you've got a co-pilot. Get up and go take care of business. When you're drinking this water and somebody says, well, I normally only drink maybe 1 cup a day of water. Okay. Let's say they need to get to 8. All right. For a week, ask them to drink 2 cups of water a day. And then next week, drink 3. And the next week, drink 4. That's okay. I mean, they'll get more comfortable as they go along, and they'll do more therapy. They won't get an instant repair of anything going on. but they will begin to hydrate. Now, the first thing that happens, this system needs to be flushed. So when you go from 1 cup to 2, you're not going to hydrate. You're going to flush the kidneys. When you go from 2 to 3, you're not going to hydrate. You're going to flush the kidneys. And until you get this system properly hydrated and flushed, then it starts to move out into the body and start to do joint tissue and things of that nature. And it's going to trickle out there as you go along. But yes, you're going to get some more frequent urination in the beginning. Some people go 1 extra glass every other day if they don't want to take that long. And in the first week, you'll take a few more trips to the bathroom. But once you've reached hydration, the frequency of urination will decrease and go back to a normal average. The volume of urine will increase. The frequency is only the initial flushing factor. Once you're hydrated, you may have more urine each time, but you will not have more frequency. You'll go back to maybe 2-3 times a day. So ask your people to go through that process slowly till they get up to hydration. Okay, we've got some great oils that are available here. We're going to do rosemary. And when I say oils, I mean essential oils. Rosemary oil can be used really specific to bedwetting. It's fantastic for that. It works for bladder infections and irritations, but it's a good oil to use if you're working on a bedwetting situation. I'll make a note there for you. Now, caution on rosemary. It can raise blood pressure, especially if someone is already in a high blood pressure situation, and you don't want to use it in pregnancy because of that. Another one that we could use here is chamomile. And we generally work with the Roman chamomile here. Mildly antiseptic. It's good for infections in the bladder system. Not as strong as cranberry. But many times in a very small person, like someone who's 4 or 5 years old, we'll use chamomile a lot as an anti-infective, an antibacterial. It's very potent in someone who doesn't require a tremendous amount of antibacterial work. So you might do some chamomile tea, take your cranberry, take your buku, and that would begin to build a good urinary infection treatment system. Another one that we can use here is clove buds oil. Clove is mainly an anti-infective. Now this one does have a little caution. You only do clove bud therapeutically in very moderate amounts. To use clove bud in large amounts for a long period of time puts the kidneys under stress. So we can do it in a small amount, but it's a good anti-infective. And we can use Roman chamomile, rosemary, remember that for bedwetting. Another one that everybody has on hand usually, if they're into any oils at all, is lavender. Very soothing and relaxing to the system. Not a specific anti-infective, but if you have an irritant or you're having a little bladder irritation, a little control problem, lavender is very helpful. It's not relaxing to the point of being incontinence. It's relaxing to let the muscles work properly. It's excellent for this. So they're the basic essential oils. There's others that we could get into. There are also lots and lots of other herbals. One thing that we find as we go through this kind of information, we could spend hours plugging in all kinds of herbals here for you. And every geographic area of the world has their own system of herbals within them. So we're real fortunate in this country and worldwide now with kind of a worldwide economy. There's herbs from China, there's herbs from South America, there's herbs from North America. We're learning about Indian herbs, there's Chinese herbs. All these things are available to us. And if you look at the patterns, you'll find that each geographic area has a commonality. For example, there's wild American ginseng, and that's for this continent. And then the same thing would be Siberian ginseng or Korean ginseng. And then you would go down to Brazil and you get suma. And you go into China and cordyceps is coming out of there now. Everybody's finding all these things pop up from around the world. In this country we have echinacea. It's been used in Europe. In Europe, chamomile would be close to that. And then you go down to South America, and we have Uña de Gato. My point in all this rambling is that you don't have to do it all, and you don't have to use every herb from everywhere. Begin to work with your body, with your person, and find out some are good for different people, different things, but you don't have to use all of these things all the time. What we're trying to do is give you a good working knowledge and encourage you maybe to do a little further studying and expand on this. We appreciate your sharing time with us today and learning about this system. And if we can go out and give people this information, give them an understanding of how their systems work, what they can do for them to keep them clean and operational. We've given them control of their lives again. They can be in charge. They can make intelligent decisions. If you'll go out and do that, give a person a gift of health. That's the absolute best thing you can do for anybody, so that they can live a better quality of life longer. And we thank you for sharing your time with us. We'd like to remind you that at the beginning of this presentation you saw a disclaimer. And we appreciate it if you would understand that this information is just for educational purposes only. It is never meant to take the place of medical treatment or diagnosis. Please keep that in mind as you share it with people.